Welcome back to Lesson 2 in our Business Ready VR series. I'm Ian Hall, Chief Product Officer for Yulio, where a key part of our approach has been identifying and reducing friction from the integration of VR into established workflows. And that's central to what we're going to be discussing today. As I covered in Lesson 1, VR is ready for business, but that doesn't mean adopting VR doesn't have its challenges. We found that even relatively small amounts of organizational friction can derail a VR initiative. For example, asking an already busy visualization team to adopt a complex or poorly thought out VR asset creation process is a recipe for an unhappy team. Today's lesson focuses on how to plan your integration to avoid common pitfalls while maximizing the benefit of bringing VR into your business. Today we're going to look at how VR impacts the workflow in 3 business areas: content creation, sharing and viewing, and client feedback and analysis. Let's start with content creation. With all the hype, it's tempting to treat VR content creation as something exotic. Suddenly your team needs to be experts in polygon decimation and game engine programming to put together a decent VR experience. The good news is, nothing is further from the truth. You can create rich, highly immersive, and interactive VR experiences using nothing more than the CAD and photography tools you're probably already using. This removes a huge potential sticking point for the content creation team. By keeping the authoring process simple and familiar, it lets designers focus on the narrative instead of getting caught up in the mechanics. It also helps avoid the temptation to cut corners in the design while relying on the novelty factor of VR to carry the day. While that might work at first, Shoddy Design is still Shoddy Design no matter how cool the medium. At Yulio, we focused on building plugins and offering guides for popular CAD and 360 photo platforms to keep things as simple as possible for the creators. Similarly, you'll want to start with your existing CAD tools and find a VR authoring process that works with those tools. It's important to remember, the most flashy VR application in the world is largely worthless if the cost and complexity of creating it makes it unrepeatable at scale. There are a few other things to consider when thinking about creating content for VR. The degree of realism you need at different stages of the design process can vary significantly. Early ideation might call for simple gray tones, while final presentation needs to look indistinguishable from real life. Look for a VR solution that lets you readily select the fidelity appropriate to the situation. It's also good to look for an authoring process that encourages quick experimentation. If getting a design from the authoring environment and onto a headset is onerous, it won't be done early and it won't be done often, which can lead to compromising final results. Finally, consider communications within the content creation team. Most organizations have a process whereby designs are vetted within the team before being forwarded to clients. A well-integrated VR authoring tool encourages this type of internal review. Despite the fact that designers tend to be really good at picturing complex scenes in 3D, we've seen multiple cases where a design review in VR has flagged significant architectural issues that were otherwise overlooked. On a side note, under our educational outreach program, there are now hundreds of architectural and interior design students using Yulio, and their professors have told us that the ability for them to experience their designs in VR often lets them spot problems before they even get to the professor's desk. The second area we're looking at is sharing and viewing. Once you've authored a great VR experience, how will you share it with your clients and your prospects? Are they going to come to the office or are you going to go to them? Do you need to share with one decision maker or a dozen? Will you be presenting the design in real time or sending it to a client for them to review later? Ideally, you want a VR solution that's going to support all of these situations. Also, consider which VR headset technology you plan to use. If you're using tethered VR like the Vive or the Oculus, you're likely limited to asking your clients to come to you. Consider how often this is practical. Our research shows that roughly 80% of day-to-day client design reviews are actually performed remotely. It's an important trade-off. Is the improved interactivity offered by a tethered rig worth the space requirements, cable wrangling, and the need to have your clients come to you? If you are leaning towards mobile VR, you should factor in the cost of providing inexpensive headsets like a Google Cardboard, since most clients likely aren't going to have one of their own at this point. They're only a few bucks, and you can get your logo printed on them, so they can also serve double duty as a branding tool. Sometimes even a simple headset isn't an option. In this case, you'll want a solution that can deliver the same content over a browser. While not as immersive as a headset experience, a good browser VR experience often makes an excellent substitute. This is also a handy fallback if you have a client who is particularly susceptible to VR-induced motion sickness. It's also worth noting that a good browser-based viewer is required if you want to leverage VR to show your work on a website or through social media, where most viewers aren't going to have headsets. It's an important consideration as you can significantly increase the total ROI for your VR investment if you factor in the potential for lead generation rather than just client presentation. The last area of practice is client feedback and analysis. Let's say you created and shared a great VR experience. You hand your client a headset, they look around and then start telling you how much they like the brickwork, but not the lighting in the corner. The question is, which brickwork? Which corner? As the designer, you want to direct the discussion, and when you get to feedback, be able to put it into context. This is why you need to factor in not just getting VR experiences to your client, but also how you will guide them through the experience both in person and remotely. Think about how you do this today. You might use something like GoToMeeting or WebEx or Skype to show your work to a remote group. You control what they see and when they see it. When presenting in VR, you should look for a similar capability. When presenting traditional media in person, it's easy to watch what your client is looking at over their shoulder. When presenting it VR in person, it's a little trickier. You should look for a VR platform that gets past the headset isolation effect and lets you see what they see. And one more thought on feedback. Guiding and watching your client's experience in VR is ideal, but it's not always possible. For example, if you post a VR experience to your website, you won't be able to follow every visitor as they explore your work. This is where analytics, or automated behavior tracking and reporting, comes in. Look for a VR solution that can tell you where, when, and how your content was consumed. This type of information is particularly useful for marketing teams that can use this to help tune your VR, web, and social media strategies for maximum impact. So in conclusion, I know that's a lot to consider. The good news is a successful VR rollout is within easy reach of most businesses. All it takes is a good understanding of existing flows and a set of thoughtful and informed decisions. So as next steps, try documenting your own workflow and getting a better understanding of where you want to use VR. That'll give you a good sense of where you want to pilot VR use and help guide the questions you'll ask a vendor, which we'll review in the next lesson. Thanks for listening.